it's just as important to involve your child in the making of the food, so that way they kind of understand what goes into it, and also the different choices that you can make. So, if we're making a salad, do you want to add tomatoes, or maybe we add something like citrus, like orange or grapefruit, to see what that's going to do to it, and
That's
giving
cool.
them that autonomy to make the choice and kind of like be guided by the adult. It really excites kids to want to eat it. And now they're so excited. Like, look what I created. I made this. I helped make dinner tonight.
Welcome to Brands for a Better World, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the people and products building a more just, healthy, and regenerative future for us all. Tune in weekly, and together we'll learn about why these better products and brands were created, how they're helping fix broken systems, and what you can do to support them. My hope is that you'll discover some new brands to love and get some sparks of inspiration that will help you live your best life. Hi, I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow to scale their impact. If you like this show, please help it grow by leaving ratings and reviews on your podcast app and by sharing your favorite episodes with your friends. Maybe this will be one of them. On this episode, I'm speaking with David Fullner and Danny Auld of Kekoa Foods about how their son being born prematurely started them on a path to launching a baby food company through Kickstarter, why it's important to pack more variety into a baby's diet, how they promote inclusion and celebrate diverse families, and their lessons learned over the past 7 years of building their business. We then wrap up with a rapid round question segment. Enjoy.
So I'm David. I'm the co-founder of, or one of the co-founders of Kekoa Foods, which is an organic, palate-expanding, delicious baby food.
Hi, I'm Danny. I'm the other co-founder of Kekoa Foods. We're excited to be here with you today, Gage.
I'm excited to chat with you all. Obviously, been following your journey as you've been building the company, partly because, we've done some work together, but also just because I love seeing what you're building, because I myself am an adventurous eater and I love what you're trying to do to get that started earlier with folks. So we'll talk a little bit more about what all you're doing. But first, I want to start with the maybe elephant in the room. If anyone looks at your backgrounds and says, what the heck is an educational psychologist and a post-production operations executive launching an organic baby food company? So can you talk a little bit about the story of how this came to be in the first place?
Yeah. No, I think it's a normal transition, really, when you think about it, like
yeah,
two different worlds merging into a third world. Yeah, that's what people do. So the genesis of the company is actually our son. He was born 8 weeks premature in Honolulu, Hawaii, to a gestational carrier. And when, for his fighting spirit, a local native cultural practitioner gave him the middle name Kekoa, which means brave warrior in Hawaiian, for his, like I said, his fighting spirit. And he kept hitting all of his milestones. And when it was time for him to eat solid foods, we wanted to make his own baby food because he needed to have nutritious food. We wanted to make sure he had really delicious food because we both love to eat. We wanted to make sure that he had something that was, palate expanding, make one dish when we get older and sit at the dinner table, that sort of thing, kind of like instill that at the beginning. So, we made all of his own baby food from scratch and included lots of herbs and spices and fruits and a ton of vegetables because we love all food. We don't really have a bias against any of it. We love to eat.
Yeah, we just really wanted to make sure that he was getting the nutrition from the foods that he was eating, especially given his delicate state, having spent so many weeks in the NICU and was still in that sort of catch-up phase up until about 2 years of age.
And I kept posting all the stuff that I was making on social media, and all of our friends and family said, your son at 8 months old is eating better than I'm eating. Is there any place I can go to purchase what you're making? Because I would eat it. Yeah, and then we thought, Eureka, what a great idea for a business.
Yeah, so David was
thanks for the hint.
Yeah, exactly. And David was working on it more on his own at first. I was still kind of working mostly on the day job and raising our son. And then David had this idea with some of the other consultants that we worked with to do a Kickstarter campaign. And he really wanted me to participate in that. So I did, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. working our day jobs. We were doing the Kickstarter as like a full-time career for, it was like 2.5 months, 3 months with all the prep time. And we just kind of realized that we work very well together. He loves the creative aspect. I kind of like the spreadsheet data analysis aspect. So we were never really stepping on each other's toes, but more complimenting what the other one was doing. And I realized that he was onto something by the response that we got by successfully funding the Kickstarter.
Very right brain,
That's
left
cool.
brain.
Yeah, we make one.
I mean,
head.
that's that's the ideal partnership, right? Because I think they say the partnerships that often fail are when the two people do the exact same thing and they can't like come to an agreement of like who's the final decision maker, and they're just butting heads all the time. Whereas if you do different things, come at things from a different angle, then you can just literally divide and conquer and be like, okay, that's your department. You're in charge of it. I'll give you input, but that's your decision to make. And then it makes everything run much smoother.
No desire to work on the spreadsheets like Danny does.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, one question though is like, how did you think to even make some of your own food from scratch? Like, was that something that you grew up with? Like one of your parents maybe making food from scratch, or is it just a habit that you two have always done for yourselves, making all of your own food from scratch? Or is it YouTube videos or advice from someone else? Like, how did that seed even get planted?
Well, for me, it was there since childhood because we always made food growing up from scratch. And I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I decided I needed to make a shake for breakfast for everybody, and decided to put in a whole bunch of different ingredients. And my mom said, I don't know if those are all going to go together. And I said, but you don't know unless you try, right? And it was not a great shake. But you know what? At 8 years old, I'm sure that most things that, you try to work on is not going to be the best either. Yeah. But from there, my whole childhood was all about making food and really enjoying everything, making it from scratch. Following recipes, but then taking that recipe and adapting it to what you want to do with it, and maybe adding a few different spices from the cupboard or different vegetables, or adding to it. So that's sensibility for me has always been there.
Yeah, he's definitely more the experimenter in the kitchen. I usually try to get the recipe and then get it to the point where I'm really happy with it, and then once in a while I'll kind of tweak it. But David likes to kind of test and push past boundaries to see what's different. And then
it's funny how those habits like that you were talking about from where you both naturally gravitate towards in running the business is kind of the same kind of idea. Like when you're in the kitchen, it's like, I prefer a recipe that's dialed in and is predictable and I can make it the same way every time. And then the other side is like, but I like creativity and I want to try stuff and
fun.
Throw everything into the shake and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the first time he made me guacamole, and I'm like, is there curry in this? Like, I've never had curry and guacamole. He's like, I thought I'd try it. See how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's totally, I'm the exact same way. Some people love it. Some people hate it, by which I mean like, rarely ever make something the same way twice. Right. Mm-hmm. So when I finally dial in a recipe to where somebody really loves it, and then I don't make it that way again, they're just frustrated because I'll just start throwing whatever's in the cupboard or something I found in the market that seemed like a good idea or whatever, and be like, let's try it. Because if you don't experiment, you'll never find your new favorite recipe. But of course, I should probably, once I get that recipe, write it down and do it that same way again.
I'll write it down for you.
Yeah.
Perfect. And you were both new to entrepreneurism, I think, too, right? When these people started saying, that's cool that you're doing that. Where could I buy it? So neither of you had run a business before. Neither of you, I don't think, had an intention of starting a business. So what was like that's a good idea. We could totally do that. Like, what was that moment? Was there a thought behind it, or did you just say, hey, we'll figure it out as we go along?
I think both, to be honest. There was a moment several years prior that we both thought, we work together really well. We manage people really well. We manage projects really well. Why don't, I think it'd be fun to actually have a business together. And it kind of like stopped there. And then all of a sudden this came about with the baby food. And we thought, okay, actually that seems like it'd be a fun idea. And then I started working with colleagues and consultants about, putting a business plan together. What does that mean? going to the bookstore, picking up books of how to run your own business, which of course is nice in a theoretical point of view, but the actual aspect of running your business, there is no handbook for it. Everything is granted. There's the core similarities for, say a CPG business like we have. You have to hit these certain mile marks and so on and so forth. But really, there's no handbook, and it's relying on your drive, asking questions, working with people to really understand what that means.
Yeah.
And from my background, I manage a pretty large team and do project management on a regular basis. So transferring that into a business was a natural transfer over of knowledge.
Yeah, I think we both acquired different skills from our careers that were very transferable. Like David mentioned, managing large projects, having large teams. And I think also like working with people who don't necessarily yet share the same vision. So how do you get them on board with the vision, and how do you move everybody forward towards that same goal?
Right. I haven't read the full book yet, but someone recommended to me the book, Everything is Figure Outable. And I just started reading it, so I can't say what it all contains, but it kind of matches that philosophy, right? It's like, hey, we've done somewhat similar stuff. We can figure this out, right? You don't have to know it all before you dive in. And I think that's what makes a lot of really interesting new businesses possible, is because the people who start them are just naive enough to not like see all the problems, but optimistic enough and confident enough that they'll figure them out when they pop up. And I think that's the magic sauce of being an entrepreneur, is you don't let all the possible hurdles stop you. You just say, we'll figure it out. We got some skills that'll contribute to this, and we'll figure out the rest along the way.
Yeah. If you thought you knew it all, you wouldn't bother to engage because it wouldn't be challenging.
Right. Or if you knew like exactly how challenging it is, you might be like, well, maybe we won't do that. Right? Because I've heard that from some like seasoned CPG entrepreneurs. They're like, if I like, they've been running their brand for like 15 years or something like that. And they're like, if I knew how hard this was going to be, I don't know if I would have started this, but I did, and I figured it out, and here we are. Right. So I love that. And I do love that. I feel like so many people are worried about starting something new because they're like, well, I don't have experience in that, or, I'm starting all over at age 40, 50, 60, whatever it is. But I like hearing these kind of sides of the stories because I think it'll encourage other people to take a chance on following their hearts and dreams too, because you don't need to have all the experience, right? You bring all the experience you've had from past jobs, from past, volunteering, from your home life, whatever, and you can bring that into the business. So I love that. That's what you both are doing too.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty obvious that babies need nutrition, right? Unfortunately, like you would hope that most baby food is really nutritious, but it's not always in this country. But from the standpoint of like fostering adventurous eaters, like working these spices in there, working these ingredients in that most people aren't typically thinking about feeding their kids, where did that idea come from? Or why do you feel like that's really important?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we were kind of observing like what some of our friends were feeding their children, or, we go to a party and you see like the food that's laid out, and then it's like, oh, this is the food for children. And it's, frozen chicken fingers and mac and cheese and no vegetables on the table, maybe some ketchup if you're lucky. Everything's very beige and brown. There's no vibrant fruits and vegetables. So just from that sort of perspective, we're like, kind of wondering as we're feeding our son, like, what would be something that we should do and what should we encourage? And then as we did some research, we're like, you eat what you know. The things that you're exposed to as a young child become familiar. They become, those hearty foods that you savor and you're always craving and wanting to have them. And when you go someplace new and everything is foreign to you, you kind of stick to the things that look the most like what you've had before. So we wanted our son to love healthy food, to be able to go somewhere and be excited about the cuisine that was there, because you experience so much of life through food. There's so much great conversation that happens around the dinner table or around, as you're traveling. So, and then what we were learning is that we could introduce some gentle herbs and spices to give flavor without having to add salt or sugar. And we figured, okay, we'll present these different combinations and see, how does he like broccoli with a little bit of lemon and ginger on it? How does he like, to have kale, maybe mixed with some curry and some other veggies? And, sure enough, he was really easy to take to these different flavors. But now he's a really bold, adventurous eater who, loves to eat all kinds of foods.
Yeah, and also when you think about what have parents been feeding their kids around the world for the last thousands of years, it's been what they've been eating. They will make something,
right.
squish it up, and get it into either a mushy paste or some sort of appropriate consistency. But the child's essentially eating what the parent is making, and that's what we have all been doing. And so why not continue that? So that when you go and get older, that you eat everything that's in front of you, and you have that taste profile, you have that palate expansion, and that at least at the bare minimum, the desire to try something new, even though you may not like it, but to try it. Because how many times just because you try something once doesn't mean that you're always going to like it, or you may not want it at that moment in your time or at that moment in your life. You want to experience it later on. So trying it, but having that ability and that foresight to want to try it, I think is a huge thing.
Yeah, I love that. Because you're right. Like, it's not like we evolved having kids just eat like butter pasta or mac and cheese or, whatever. Like there's no way that's how kids were raised back in the day before Kraft invented mac and cheese or something. So
right, yeah.
I think that makes total sense. And I love the thinking, and I've seen it in a few like family members or friends who feed their kids just all the things, how many more things they're willing to eat and how much more excited they are when they go to a restaurant. Because I have some friends who they come to visit with their kids, and we're picking out restaurants and we send them a list of various places we could go eat. And they're like, yeah, we can't go to any of those places. Our kids won't touch any of that stuff on the menu. And it's like, oh, dang, that's too bad, because these are really good restaurants, right? So teaching them from an early age all the variety of food is probably helpful. Go ahead.
I would love to get rid of children's menus. Just, you can identify it from like a mile away, right? Like chicken fingers, maybe pizza, buttered pasta. But they don't have that if you go to other parts of the world. Like the children are eating what the parents are eating, what the adults are eating, just in small.
Yeah, if anything, maybe instead of a children's menu, have like a small portions menu or something like that, right? That's all we really need. That makes sense.
Exactly.
And then also, like, if they're eating a wider variety of stuff, that also ties back to the nutrition, right? Because if they're only eating like butter pasta, where are they getting the rest of their nutrition from? So that's probably a big part of it.
Definitely.
And then I'm curious, this is just a theory I'm making up on the spot, but I imagine if you're also introducing your son to all these different spices and vegetables and different things that maybe he wouldn't have normally eaten in regular baby food, have you seen it maybe encourage him be more curious about maybe getting in the kitchen and seeing how food is made or wanting to cook? And I say that theory because like when you start to dig into the nuance of like tasting food or enjoying food, maybe it makes you more curious about trying to recreate some of that stuff at home, or makes it easier to do so because now you know what that spice is and what it tastes like, and you can add that into other dishes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as important to involve your child in the making of the food, so that way they kind of understand what goes into it, and also the different choices that you can make. So, if we're making a salad, do you want to add tomatoes, or maybe we add something like citrus, like orange or grapefruit, to see what that's going to do to it, and giving them that autonomy to make the choice and kind of like be guided by the adult. It really excites kids to want to eat it. And now they're so excited. Like, look what I created. I made this. I helped make dinner tonight.
That's cool.
So, it definitely, both it sparks the curiosity, but also by encouraging them to participate, that continues to like inspire the engagement in food and cooking and healthy eating. And I think that's where we've had most of our nutrition conversations, is around, as we're preparing the food, why we might choose something over something else.
Right. Yeah. And obviously we know that American diet in general, or the American habits around food, are not super great. So by inviting them in a kitchen, getting them started with a wider palate for food, you're just setting them up for not just a healthy childhood, but a healthy life from here forward, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think having that involvement really, you just hit the nail on the head. It's setting them up for that lifetime of healthy eating and exploring different options that are out there. Because we know adults that have a very limited view on food and really want to only eat certain things because, again, going back to Danny's earlier point, you eat what you know. And that's what they grew up with. And even as an adult, they're still adhering to those kind of self-imposed rules of I should only eat this or I only want to eat that. I don't like that. Well, you have you tried in the last 10, 15 years now that you're an adult?
Yeah.
Maybe you should go for it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Try a new vegetable.
You may like it.
Yeah. Like a steamed Brussels sprout with nothing on it is going to turn most children off, right? So when they have that, and then later in life as an adult, they're like, see Brussels sprouts on a menu. They're like, oh, those things are disgusting.
Right.
But a steamed Brussels sprout is wildly different from like a sauteed Brussels sprout with like butter and bacon and some spices or something like that, or dipped in a curry sauce, like whole different experience. So to your point, yeah, why don't you, just because you didn't like it once doesn't mean you won't like it the next time.
Right.
Yeah. That's
yeah,
cool.
It's definitely important to try the variety of foods.
So obviously, getting babies a healthy start and encouraging them to be adventurous eaters is a big part of the brand or part of the mission of what you're trying to do with Kekoa. But can you also talk about the other things that you're kind of celebrating, like the diversity of families and how you give back to community? Like, what are some of the ethos driving your company forward and help you kind of pursue the mission that feels good for you?
Yeah. Well, we have what's called our inclusive parenting campaign, where we really lean into the fact that a family is comprised of so many different types of possibilities. It's not, the archetype that was set by the baby food industry, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, is a certain single type of person that is not true to this day. For example, we're a two-dad family. So that breaks that archetype right there. And we didn't feel that any messaging was actually speaking to us. It was always speaking to that certain type. And families are really comprised of married parents, single parents, dads, moms, aunts, uncles, even, neighborhood friends that help out. That's all comprised of creating that village or that family. And we really pride ourselves on being able to speak to that full group of people and to make sure that they're seen and heard, because, let's face it, every parent, every caregiver, every guardian needs to be seen and heard, because parenting is a really tough job, and we need to make sure that we're celebrated in every aspect of it and supported and elevated.
Yeah. There's so many aspects of like mom shaming and people feeling bad because they made they attempted something and it didn't quite work out. Like, so instead of pushing people down, why not lift each other up? Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, there is that old adage or phrase or whatever, it takes a village, right? So it does take a village, not only just in your household. It's not just mom or whatever traditionally is like what we all point our finger to is like, oh, the mom takes care of the kids, right? But it's like, no, well, dads can take care of kids. Their siblings can take care of kids. Neighbors take care of kids. Grandparents take care of kids. Like there's all the people in the community are taking care of kids, and to assume that there's only one formula for what a family is just ridiculous.
Yeah. And even with our family, obviously there's the two of us and our son, but we also have both of our moms live with us and we take care of them. And my sister, our son's aunt, is part of the company. And she's one of the caregivers, both, as an aunt, and helps out with our son. And we all help take care of our moms. And so we have a really dynamic family unit that is not the typical 1940s, 50s mom stays home, dad goes to work, 2.5 kids. Like that doesn't happen in our family. And we want to make sure that, people see that and that this entire household is supporting each other and also helping to make sure that our son is raised to the best of his abilities and become a really wonderful contributing member of our society.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then also you do a lot of give back too, right? Can you talk about some of that work that you do?
Sure. Yeah. As David was creating these amazing recipes that we knew would be more of a premium product, it was really important to me to think about nutrition in this country and having access to everybody. So since our inception as a company, we've always given back through food, funds, and our own time. With our Kickstarter, we partnered with the Newark YMCA. They have a residence hall with about 200 residents, where about 80 of them are infants. And so they agreed to partner with us that if any of our Kickstarter partners are people that were funding the Kickstarter, if they wanted to send the products there, that they could. So when we launched, we were able to put on a panel with a community activist as well as a pediatric nutritionist and distribute food to 100 families and talk about the importance of nutrition from the time of inception all the way through a person's life. And it was a really engaging, dynamic conversation that we had. And we're really excited to partner there. Since then, we've done a few other initiatives, including sending food to Hawaii after the wildfires. And I think our most established partnership that we have now is with a group called Grace, based in Summit, New Jersey. So they do weekly distributions to the community there. And what I thought was really awesome is that when we were first working with them, they would get these foods and items that they would bag up, and anybody coming would each receive that bag. But what they realized was not every person or group that comes through is necessarily the same exact looking group. So you may have, a couple, and they may, be having difficulties in the wintertime because they do more construction outdoor work. So they aren't able to kind of make, ends meet from week to week. So they could come in and select from fresh produce and some dairy items as well as household items. And then a family with lots of small children, maybe an infant, they could come and select diapers and formula and things like that. So this choice model that they implemented, it really puts the person first and really thinks about the dignity of each individual. So we've provided food and we've helped with the distributions and really just kind of enjoyed getting to know the team there and continuing to work with them and the good work that they do.
Yeah, I love how that ties back to the inclusive family model, right? Too, because it's not only are families made up of different numbers of people in the household or different members of people, but then also every situation is going to be a little bit different in terms of the needs. So that one give back right there kind of ties your other ethos or mission in too. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I think you're about a bit over 6 years into building this company so far. I pulled that number from LinkedIn, and some people don't put the date they launched the brand, but they've worked on it for 3 years before. So I don't know if that's the exact number, but let's just say roughly 6 years into building the business. What are the biggest challenges you've had to overcome so far? Biggest or even most surprising, something you didn't expect would be a challenge?
A global pandemic would be one.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? That was a challenge?
What? It's so crazy.
Your pandemic was hard. Mine was simple.
I know, so easy.
No.
Loved it.
6 years ago is when we did the Kickstarter. And so that was successful. So that's when I was I'm all in on this. I want us to start Kekoa Foods. I want to deliver on the Kickstarter promise that we made. And so we spent the next several months trying to figure out our supply chain. And also, how can we, as two working parents who, have kind of come to rely on two salaries, how can one of us step back and start the company while the other one is kind of holding down, the home and making sure we can eat every week and have
pay
clothes.
the bills.
Yeah. So I, in looking at the numbers, I realized that David should stay working and that I should be the one to take the lead first, which was surprising to him because he wanted to be the one to do it.
He's like, wait. Can we talk about this?
Yeah. This is my creative envision.
I had been working on it for several years prior with a business plan and an idea and the recipes and how can this work from going from a kitchen to having it on a shelf potentially at a store, because there's a huge evolution that needs to happen. And then Danny says, "Sure, I'll run it."
Yeah.
Okay. I was not expecting that, but that sounds great.
Yeah. So
that's better that way than, no, I don't think we should pursue this business. Because
right. I guess the alternative not great.
Yeah, some couples, when one of them is like, "Hey, I'm starting this cool business," the other person's like, "This is going to disrupt our way of life and kind of cost money, and I don't want to change our comfort of living or whatever." That they're resistant to that change. But it's kind of a nice opposite there, where Danny was just ready to dive right in and get involved. Right? That's cool.
Yeah. So I resigned my 20-year career January of 2020 because we're like 2020 is going to be an amazing year. There's so much promise out there. It's going to be fantastic. So sure enough, less than 6 weeks later, the world is shutting down around us. The supply chain that we were having is crumbling beneath our feet. And we just kind of were a little bit, I was spiraling a little because having, left this safe and steady career to take this big challenge, and now everything's unraveling. Our son was doing homeschool, on a computer in first grade and really struggling with that. So it was, kind of just like lose your mind every day. But we ended up regrouping, building out our supply chain again, finding an even better co-packing partner, I think. Mm-hmm. And, it took a lot more time than we expected, but finally in January of 22, we were able to launch online. So it was, a very long process to get to that point, but quite the rewarding one once we finally made it.
Right. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially people who haven't worked in the specific category they're jumping into as an entrepreneur, often underestimate how much time it takes to get off the ground. But as you just pointed out, like successful Kickstarter in 2020 and then 2022 is when you're able to start selling product online or whatever. Like there's, right. And that doesn't even account for all the work before the Kickstarter, right? So sometimes it's years of working on a business before you even have, a consistent amount of product to sell to the public to like start scaling the company. So that's part of the, if I knew all this beforehand, maybe I wouldn't have done it kind of philosophy, but you're like, jump in and do it anyway. Another thing that popped in my head is like, you leave your 20-year career and then just to work on this business, and the pandemic hits and you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? So there could have been like that fear of like, this was a terrible decision. But when you think about it, if you hadn't done that, maybe Kekoa wouldn't exist, because if that pandemic hit and there wasn't somebody working on it full time to try to figure out how to pivot and make this thing work, then maybe it would have just become this maybe unnecessary burden, and it would have been dropped from your priorities. So it's like bad timing, but also the best timing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think Kekoa would have happened if I had still been at the old job. If we had put it off for like a 6-month period, we wouldn't have. Yeah. I don't think it would have happened.
No, totally agree. And, it's when you're living in the middle of something like that, it's, I'm sure everyone can attest to this. It was a struggle to get through the day because there were so many variables, so many unknowns from a global perspective to even your own house or, where you're living. And the fact that we were able to get through that. And, we're fortunate that Danny was able to help our son and help him get through school and really kind of help him focus, because he needed that from, going from finishing his second half of his first grade year completely remote on a device where, at that age, not a lot of device use had been in play. And so he's trying to not only navigate how to use the device, but how to do a school. And Danny was able to give him the attention, but also start the business. So there was a lot of, pieces to that puzzle that were kind of in play that we were able to finally put that together. And, I think you said it, in a very good way, Gage, that if you know what you're going to get into from a entrepreneurial standpoint or even CPG, you probably wouldn't do it, because the amount of unknowns is, and even to this day, we're several years into actually having product and selling. We're still coming across on a daily basis a lot of unknowns that we have to navigate, and a lot of issues or problems, and never once has it been, all right, we're done, pack it up. It's always, all right, well, that's a hurdle that we're going to get over. It's not stopping us. It's not a brick wall that's going to be in its place, because the only outcome is figuring it out to get to the point of going into production, or getting it on our product onto the shelf, or getting our product shipped from, this warehouse to that warehouse. Like it's all fixable.
It's all figure outable.
All figure outable, like the book. Yeah.
Fixable and figure outable.
Yeah, that's exactly it though. It's and to your point, yeah, I always thought when I was starting my business, I'm like, 5 years in or whatever, being like, oh, when I'm 10 years in, I'll probably have it all figured out and everything will be run smoothly. But like what I've found, I'm 15 years into Modern Species now, and what I've found is you never have it all figured out because the size of your company changes, the makeup of your team changes, the economy changes, the world changes, your competitors change, your clients change, your customers, whatever, like all the variables. Of all the variables, at least a few of them are going to be changing this quarter and then a few more next quarter or whatever. So there's always another challenge to solve. So if you don't embrace those as just like challenges to solve and things that are figure outable, then you'll probably give up. But if you just see them all as just, this is just part of the journey, like, yeah, we don't have this part figured out, but we'll figure that out. And then something else will break and we'll figure that out and just keep going. So I think that's an important lesson. And part of why I do this podcast is I don't want to scare people off of being an entrepreneur or following their passions or dreams. But I think by sharing our knowledge and lessons learned with each other, we can all go further faster together because I can learn a mistake to avoid by hearing your story, and I can share some advice from my side that'll help you avoid some mistakes. And then we both got to skip a year of learning, right? So I love just putting these stories out there. Sorry, I cut you off. I think you were going to say something.
No, we were just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, feel free to keep agreeing. No.
I think we refer to it as days that end in Y. Or the days that you wake up with a challenge you have to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we ask questions, and it's okay not to know. And it's you just gotta keep moving forward and figure it out, and you'll get there.
Yeah. I like that. Just ask questions and figure it out, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. So we've talked a lot about the journey so far, but like what's a snapshot of what Kekoa looks like right now? Like what products do you have? What are the plans for the future look like? What are some of the big successes that you're kind of celebrating or living in right now?
I think our biggest success, it's still obviously continuing, thank goodness, was the national rollout in Sprouts Farmers Market last May. And that was really fun because we did a virtual pitch with them the previous October, and the buyer said in the middle of the pitch, I love it. I want all 7. Make sure it happens. We'll launch in May. And and Danny said, but we have more of our presentation to go through. And I kept hitting him under the table, and I said, we'll make it work. We'll email you the rest of the presentation. You can take a look at it on your own time. And then we ended the Zoom, and the two of us thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
But it ties back into that there's no way to have it fail. So we figured everything out. We got everything aligned, and we did our launch in May, or last May. So it's been about a year that we've been at Sprouts, and it's been really fantastic.
Yeah, and then since Sprouts, like we built up our team, so we have a lot of different consultants in the area of sales, broker, advertising and marketing, operations. So we've been able to continue to expand in retail. So we're basically in like every corner of the country and in between. So we have Sprouts Farmers Market, Wegmans, in the Pacific Northwest. We have PCC and Market of Choice. We're in Central Market in Texas, Pete's in the Chicago area. And then next month we're launching in Mom's Organic Market. Nice. And also in Woodman's. So yeah, we're really excited. We've been having a lot of amazing retail success. The buyers are really resonating with how we differentiate from other products out there. So it's been quite the roller coaster ride, but it's exciting right now.
Yeah. So we're getting close to about 700 doors, which this time last year we were in one, which was a small co-op just like 2 towns over.
Yeah.
So it's been incredible so far.
How do you calculate that percentage of growth?
Through the gray hairs in my beard.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is actually something, I forget who I was talking to, but we were joking about how both the pandemic, but also just entrepreneurship in general will make all the grays come out in your hair pretty quickly, because it's just, you're constantly dealing with stress. But I feel like it's different stress when it's something you believe in and you care about and you're really passionate about. Like, it's still stress, but I want to believe, maybe this is just optimistic thinking, but I want to believe it's not the type of stress we keep always hearing about that's killing us, right? Like causing heart problems and whatever. It's like a good stress where you're like, this is a challenge and I'm going to tackle it and it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to be really fulfilled and happy, as we check off each box. So I feel like it's the good type of stress, but it is stressful.
Right.
Yes, definitely stressful.
Yeah, when we originally launched, we had just 3 SKUs or 3 flavors. And a year later, we launched 4 additional flavors. So we have a total of 7 at the moment. And they're all very vegetable based and herbs and spices, veggie forward. Yeah. And the thing that we love about our products, it has a really wonderful flavor to it. It tastes really good. There's no added sugars or salts. Everything is based off of that flavor profile and the nutrition value on the vegetables. And all of that comes from the earth. All of it is grown and then put into our products. Nothing is fake. Nothing is fortified. It's all organic. And granted, I'm a little biased, but I'm the one that created all the recipes, and they're based on what we fed our son, but they're absolutely delicious.
Well, you got to create them and develop something that's delicious. And then I'm sure Danny was like, okay, now we need to lock this formula down and put it in a spreadsheet, right, and you're not allowed to tweak it.
There's many times that Danny kept saying, guess what you're doing this weekend? We'll see you on Sunday when you come out of the kitchen and you have it all figured out.
And I want it repeatable.
Exactly.
Same flavor, multiple batches.
Fill it in.
Yeah. One thing, I don't know how much of a challenge this was for you, but one thing I hear a lot with food companies is maybe you're really good at your own personal cooking or baking or whatever it is, but there's a whole different animal to creating a recipe at scale, right? Because manufacturers don't work on like a dash of this or a cup of that. It's like by the pound or something like that. So it's like, what was that process like for you to transfer your natural way of developing a recipe into something that was executable at scale?
Well,
it's kind of stages.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that new entrepreneurs, especially in CPG, should do is try to see what food incubators are near you. So we were fortunate enough, being in New Jersey, that we could work with the Rutgers University Food Innovation Center. So they provided a lot of free services to us.
Nice.
And connected us to a lot of different folks. And one of the challenges is that they don't really validate baby food because it's a higher standard, obviously, because it's babies. So they then connected us to the Cornell University Food Venture Center. And so David would test the recipes at home, make sure they tasted good based on what we were purchasing at our grocery store. And then he would send it to them to get confirmation of the recipe, if this could be shelf stable or not. So it took a few iterations, and our son is
You're very nice. More than a few.
There's a little trauma bubbling.
Our son's our number one taste tester. So if he didn't like it, then David had to go back to the drawing board. So as long as our son approved and Cornell said that it would, the recipe was shelf stable, then we kind of like locked those in. As we mentioned, we had one co-packer we were working with, and then started to work with a new one. So they wanted to kind of validate everything as well. So we learned even through that process that what we thought was shelf stable was still requiring more effort. But because of Rutgers and Cornell, we saved a lot of money in the testing process along the way, and learned a lot more about food science and talked to a lot of food scientists along the way as well.
Love it.
It was a lot of on the ground training of how to become a food scientist without having to actually go to school.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole nuance that I was completely unaware of when we were starting the process way early on, before we were looking at making that recipe from what I made in the kitchen for our son to a commercial aspect when it could be sold on a shelf at a store.
Yeah. And was that the learning curve mostly around making something that was shelf stable, or was it more around the learning curve of like ingredients that are scalable or like supply chain or other things like that, or like, yeah, I use this super premium vanilla for at home or something like that, but then I can't get that commercially, or I can't afford that commercially in these recipes. Like, which side of it was the hurdle for you?
It's a little bit of both, because they're so intertwined, because you can't really have one without the other. You know, because our product is shelf stable, it has to be at a certain pH. But then you also need to make sure that you're using vegetables and different products that will taste good and that is nutritious. And so it's trying to find this very delicate balance. You know, I think the best way of comparing it is baking, because baking is a true science. That one ingredient isn't there, or too much or too less, then whatever you're baking doesn't work out well. I think in this sort of scenario, it's very similar, that you want to make sure that all your levels are in a proper place. All of your ingredients that you're using is, you can actually taste them, and they're not, one's not masking the other over. And it's not just like the single taste, but you can taste all the different ingredients. And then, of course, these are based, like I said, based off of what we fed our son. And those ingredients are readily available at the grocery store, but they're not readily available when you try to mass produce them and you go to suppliers. And so when I handed over the recipes to Danny and said, hey, can you find ingredient suppliers that could fulfill these? He said, I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah, so that was quite the education. You don't have purple potatoes in 5,000-pound quantities that are ready to throw into the kettle for baby food
year round.
Yeah, like I need it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a big educational experience, and but that helped, I think, now, like, to come up with the 4 new flavors. You know, we were much more informed and had partners that we had already been talking to, so we had a much better sense of where we could source the ingredients and how much it was going to cost and if it was going to make sense or not. But I have to say, David was very uncompromising about what the taste would be, what the quality would be, and the combinations that he wanted to see in the final product, because that was most important, was that the nutrition and the flavor were definitely premium.
Yeah, that is important, because I mean, whenever there's consumer surveys about what's important when they're buying a food product, you know, taste, quality, or whatever is always at the top. And then you can get into things like brand story or nutrition or other kind of things, but like, it's got to taste good, right? People don't want to eat cardboard just because it's healthy, and people don't want to eat a crappy product just because they like the brand. You know, like it's got to taste good. So being uncompromising about that is probably a good thing to be uncompromising about.
Yes,
that makes sense.
Challenging at the time, but it's definitely worth it in the long run.
Yeah. Maybe you want to strangle each other during part of the process, but but at the end, you've got a product people love and does well at retail, so it works, right?
Yeah, we never had any conflict.
No, none at all. Never. You'd be the first couple ever then that didn't have conflict running a business.
But we never lie or spend the truth.
Yeah. So lots of lessons learned there. So what advice would you, if you could go back like 7 years ago or even earlier than that, before you even started thinking about this, what advice would you give yourself now that you know what you know?
Oh boy. I would probably say, it's okay. Like, take a deep breath. You'll get through this, because so many times you get so clouded by frustration or another problem or another 4 problems. And you're like, when will this ever end? And realizing that you'll get to the other side of that. It's going to be all right. You know, lean into those that are supporting you. Ask lots of questions to people that you get to know in the industry, because one thing we've gotten to know are, you know, obviously quite a few people in the CPG industry. And I cannot tell you another industry how supportive they are. And every time we go to an event, every time we go to a trade show, we run into people that we know, and then meet other new people, and they're all so encouraging. They're all very helpful. They're, oh, you're looking for this? I know someone that actually has that. And then they connect you to that. it's also just asking and really getting yourself out of your comfort zone and enjoy it. That I think that's the other part. It's hard to take a step back to enjoy and look at what you're building at the time that you're building it. But just step back. It's okay. Enjoy the build, but also know that another day will happen and you'll get through that too.
Yeah. I mean, I would just emphasize the part of telling someone that it's going to take longer than you think because of all these obstacles. But if you're somebody that like takes a challenge and solves it and works around it, then this is a really rewarding experience. So give yourself the time to get to the end goal. But it's really worth it in the end. And just keep going and know that you're basically solving problems every day as an entrepreneur.
And also be kind to yourself. I think that's the biggest thing. I think the two of us, separately will beat ourselves up so much of like, oh, I should have, or, I can't believe I did. And realizing it's okay. We're human. We make mistakes. It's all good. Be kind to yourself and to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all part of the process, right? Like you were saying, that kind of like enjoy it and sit back, enjoy the process kind of, and then it's going to take longer than you think. Be kind to yourself. It's just having the understanding that, like you said at the start, you'll get through it. Take a deep breath. It's all part of the process. Lean into your support and just keep going. As long as you keep going, you'll get somewhere. So don't worry don't sweat the small stuff or even the big stuff, because it's all figure outable. This keeps coming back up. So we're going to have to put like a link to the book, and hopefully it's actually a good book, because I haven't read it yet, but I hear it's good. Awesome. Well, great stories there. Let's wrap up with a little rapid round.
Sure.
Question segment. So obviously you can both feel free to add your own answer. What was your favorite food as a child?
Mine was anything Italian, so eggplant parm, pizza.
Oddly enough, I really like beets.
What kind? Like how? Like just
at the time,
beets?
Raw. Well, this is also back in the 80s, so it was just canned beets. I love canned beets because that's what we had a lot of. Like I said, this was the 80s, so it's a very different time.
They are surprisingly good, aren't they?
I know.
I also just love roasting beets. Like when I'm making some sort of like roasted veggie dish, like beets have to go in there. They're so good roasted. Awesome. So what's your favorite thing to do together as a family? And hopefully it's not just more work.
Spreadsheets.
I love doing our taxes.
Now that we're getting into the summer, I'd say the beach is definitely one of our favorite things to do. So, and we're about an hour from the Jersey Shore, so we can pop down there for the day or, stay extended times as well.
Yeah, I think just being outdoors, the three of us, now, with my sister here, the four of us going out and doing hikes and just spending time together outside I think it's just key for my mental sanity, but that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, probably not just your mental sanity. I think it's like built into us as humans to spend some time with nature. So those are both great options and fun activities to do where you're hopefully not thinking about all the spreadsheets and formulas while you're out there.
Only on the drive there.
Right. Take a conference call on the way there. Yeah. Okay. So what's the best piece of advice you've received either recently or ever?
I mean, I think David touched on this a little bit earlier. I think asking questions, I sometimes hesitate because I don't want to sound foolish, if I don't know enough about the subject area and if I'm surrounded by people who know more than I do. But if you don't ask that question, you don't get your answer. And the other thing too, in CPG, like you have to kind of negotiate, if you're going to work with a new retailer or even a new consultant, they might present a package to you and maybe one that's a little tough for you to muster at the time. So, where can you kind of meet us halfway? Like we can't necessarily do a full free fill for 50 stores. Can you kind of partner with us? Maybe we do a large promo, a good significant promo, or additional ones. But at least we can get paid for that first order rather than having to, give it all out for free to start.
Nice.
I would say don't interpret kindness and inclusivity as being weak or unknowing, because a lot of times people will perceive that as being not very smart, maybe a little bit on the weak side. If you're, you include everybody and you're super nice and you're not really sure what you're talking about. But a lot of times those are the stronger people, because they actually take the moment and the time to actually invest in another person and hear their story, so that you guys can actually share things back and forth.
Yeah, I love that, because it is like being vulnerable is much harder than, being closed off. So it's the same kind of thing. Like as a leader, being kind and including people takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of compassion, etc. So those are all things that take a lot of effort and work. So technically that's a stronger person than somebody who just yells at everyone and says, go just do it my way. Like that takes zero effort, right? Love it. Okay, so who's an impact-driven leader you admire and why?
For me, I think of two women that I worked with at John Jay College, the last school that I was at, Dara Byrne and Janice Johnson-Dias. They both really think about who people are and how to have representation for them, in all the different conversations. So women of color, people who are marginalized in some other way, like they think about their experience and how they're included in the conversation and how they can contribute. So I think as impact-driven leaders, they're definitely people that I look up to and respect.
Awesome.
I would say for me, it was actually two dance professors. They're a married couple. They're now retired. But my freshman year in undergrad and going to dance class and working with them for the 4 years I was there, they did not accept subpar. They set the bar at excellent, and you had to meet it or exceed it. And with that drive, you also they had open arms of acceptance, because there's a lot of, you're 18 to 21 years old, you're still figuring yourself out. And no matter where you were on your life journey, they were there to help support you and listen to you and never judge you, but also push you to be a better person of where you think that you needed to go.
That's amazing. So is that where you learned to do your now famous on-stage backflip at the pitch competition?
I would like to partly. I've been able to do the splits doing a lot of athletic sports and yoga and everything growing up, but I would say come the aerial aspect of things, that probably happened there.
That's awesome. So they've secured you wins at pitches too. I mean, I'm sure that
exactly
you didn't need that part, I'm sure, to win, right? It's yeah. Okay, last one. Since this podcast is called Brands for a Better World, what does a better world mean to you?
I think a better world for me is trying to do something that when you leave it, someone else feels better for all the things that you did. That the actions you took impact other people, knowing or unknowing, in a way that they can keep going forward.
Yeah, I think for me, just knowing that we still have hunger in the world, that there's food insecurity. I think a better world is a world where we don't have that. And people talk about, food deserts, but I think that what we also should be tackling are nutrition deserts, because you could go to certain areas and people have access to what we would call food in this country, but it's, snacks that are lacking in nutrition, not healthy. And to know that, so many children, even in this country, go to school hungry, how can they learn? How can they perform and concentrate and eventually become successful adults if they're going to school hungry? Mm-hmm. I can't think when I'm hungry. Like, I need to take a break and eat something before I can kind of finish tackling something I'm working on. So a better world to me would be, one where that's not an issue.
Awesome. Both beautiful answers, and kind of reflect a lot of what you're working on too with the company, which is what I love about aligning our personal passions with our work, right? So it's not the default. Most people don't get to pursue their passions in their work. So I think it's a privilege and I love it. And just love what you guys are doing around helping encourage more inclusive families, giving back, more nutritious and adventurous food for children, because, getting them set up right from the beginning will make their lives so much easier after that. Plus, you make the parents' life easier in the process by them being able to just buy it instead of having to make it at home and figure out how to make it at home. So all beautiful things. So thanks for being great examples of impact-driven leaders yourselves. And look forward to continue seeing you grow this mission.
Thank you, Gage. And thank you for being part of the journey for so many years, because you've definitely not only helped us with what you do as part of your company, but also just being a connector and a friend in the industry who has, introduced us to others who have helped us along the way. So kind of what Dave was saying about CPG being filled with a lot of wonderful, kind people, you're definitely an example that we think of in that regard.
I appreciate that. Great. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about David and Danny or their brand, go to kekoafoods.com. That's KEKOA foods.com. If you like this show, remember to help us grow by liking, reviewing, and sharing. If you're new here, don't forget we have over 100 episodes in the archive. Some might be called Evolve CPG, but it's the same show, so dig in for more goodness. If you consider yourself an impact-driven professional, join me over at impactdriven.community, where we're supporting each other's growth as impact leaders.